If you think Roth conversions might be good for you, but you're tired of hearing the same old generic advice, well, you're in the right place, hopefully. In this video, I'm going to show you a framework for making these strategic Roth IRA conversions with flowcharts so that you can know if they're right for you and if it's something that you need to do this year. Hi, I'm Patrick King. And by the way, I published my first Roth conversion video back in 2020, so go check that out if you want to have a laugh. So there are a ton of takes from financial planners here on YouTube when it comes to strategic Roth IRA conversions. And unfortunately, there's a lot of conflicting advice. And while I do love that there's a ton of great thinking out there from some very talented financial planners, all of this conflicting information doesn't make it any easier for you. So what I'm going to do today is show you the easy framework to sift through all of this conflicting information on Roth conversions so that you can determine if Roth conversions could work for you, when you should convert, and how to actually do this every year. And we'll wrap up with an exception that you'll want to be aware of. All right, let's get you retired. But first, we need to figure out if these strategic Roth IRA conversions even makes sense for you. So if you've clicked on this video, I'll already assume that you know about this strategy. If not, I'll leave a link to another video in the description below. Okay, so there are 4 questions that we need to ask in order to determine if these are right for you. The first determining factor is your life expectancy assumptions. And to illustrate this, let's dive into Right Capital and revisit our friends, the Lebowskis. In this plan, the dude and Maud have just under $1.5 million in retirement investment assets. And of that, the majority, over 85%, are in tax-deferred accounts. So potentially, they have a lot of opportunity to make Roth conversions. And when we run our tax analysis, we find that converting up to the 12% tax bracket would indeed provide them with a benefit. But let's take a look at what changing the life expectancy numbers would do in this case.
This is a very complicated case.
The default life expectancy numbers are age 90 for the dude and 92 for Maud. And while I've made videos in the past about why you should incorporate a longer life expectancy into your financial plan, I get that not everyone agrees with me on this point. So let's take a look at how these strategic Roth conversions work out for them if we lower their life expectancies to age 83 for the dude and age 85 for Maud. So when we make these changes in life expectancy, we see that they end up worse off than if they'd done no Roth conversions at all. So what does this tell us? It means that there's a break-even point later in life that you'll need to reach before this strategy makes sense. Not everyone expects or wants to live into their 90s. Maybe take a look at your health and family history to make a judgment call on what to include in your financial plan. But if it's reasonable for you to live long enough to break even on these conversions, that brings us to our second filtering question. Do you expect to be in a lower tax bracket in the future? The whole idea of these strategic partial Roth IRA conversions is to pay taxes on the withdrawals from your retirement accounts when your taxes are the lowest. When it comes to your taxes, we want to play chess, not checkers. And so the biggest conversion opportunity for most people tends to be in their gap years, the years between retirement and when their RMDs begin. This period of time tends to be when retirees see their taxable income drop after their income from work stops and before the higher taxes that come along with RMDs start. But it doesn't have to be limited to your gap years. Any year when you expect your taxable income to be lower than normal would be a good time to consider a conversion. For instance, if you're a commissioned salesperson and you have a down year, that may be a good time to consider a conversion. I actually made a pretty large Roth conversion the year I started my firm because I knew I was going to have a dip in my income that year. And I'm so glad that I did, even though it really stung to pay the tax bill in April the following year. But the whole point of this entire exercise is to convert retirement assets to Roth assets at a lower rate than you'd otherwise pay if you waited until your RMDs kick in. If, through some combination of pension income, Social Security, or other retirement income such as rental real estate, you don't expect your tax rate to come down much, well, strategic Roth IRA conversions may not make sense for you. But if you do think that your taxable income will be lower in the future, that brings us to our next filtering question. What are your plans for this money when you're gone? So the third question that we need to answer before you even think about making strategic Roth conversions is, do you have some of this money earmarked for charity or an heir after you're gone? Now, let's start with leaving money to a charity after you pass. Starting at age 70 and a half, you can make what are called qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs, directly from your tax-deferred retirement accounts to a registered charity. The great thing about these QCDs is that the withdrawals are not included in your taxable income, and they can satisfy your RMD requirements. And so, since the QCDs aren't taxable to you, it doesn't make sense to make strategic Roth conversions on this money. You'd just be paying taxes on something you wouldn't have had to. And so that brings us to leaving some of this money to an heir. If they're in a lower tax bracket than you, then it may make more sense to not convert and include some of your tax-deferred assets in their inheritance. Of course, there are rules concerning the distribution of a tax-deferred account that's inherited by a non-spousal beneficiary, so this is something that you'll want to plan for carefully. But whether it's a charity or an heir in a lower tax bracket, this kind of legacy planning may mean that it doesn't make sense to do strategic Roth IRA conversions. And this brings us to our fourth and final filtering question on whether or not you should make strategic Roth IRA conversions. Do you expect your RMDs will be small? If your RMDs aren't really going to add a lot of taxable income in the future, then it may not be worth the effort. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do these Roth conversions in this case, but the juice may not be worth the squeeze. Okay, if you've answered all of these questions and it still sounds like Roth conversions might be a good idea, let's talk about when you should convert. And by the way, if you need any help with this, click on the link below to book a call with us so we can help you analyze your situation and optimize your retirement plan. So if these conversions might be right for you, we need to make sure that the time is right. And the first question that we want to ask is, do you have a plan to pay the taxes? Now, this one is pretty straightforward. Since Roth conversions are taxable income, you'll owe taxes on whatever amount that you convert. And so you have two options here. You can pay the taxes out of pocket, or you can withhold taxes from the amount that you convert. Of course, withholding taxes from the conversion is the easiest way to do this without impacting your cash holdings, but less goes into the Roth account. That being said, you'll have to pay the taxes from somewhere. It's just less tax efficient than paying out of pocket. But there's a potential problem with withholding taxes. If you're under age 59 and a half, what you withhold for taxes would be considered an early distribution and subject to a 10% penalty. So if you're under age 59 and a half, you really do need to come out of pocket for the taxes on these conversions. In the real world, this is what holds people up from making these conversions every year. Even when you expect this strategy to pay off for you, there's something less than pleasant about stroking a big check to the government every year. But even if you do have the cash to pay the tax bill, there's still more to consider before you decide to go through with this. As I mentioned before, the whole point is to convert when you're in a place where you expect your taxable income to be lower. Even before your RMDs kick in, there's a good chance that you still have some sort of other taxable income sources during this stretch when you're considering your strategic Roth conversions. That could include Social Security income, pension income, or rental real estate. Or it could potentially include some sort of one-time item, such as a lump sum distribution from a retirement account, or some realized income from restricted stock vesting that you were able to hold on to after you retired. If you do have some sort of income that could potentially lower the amount that you convert before you bump up against the top of your current tax bracket, then you'll want to proceed with caution. You may be able to convert, but it might be lower than you expected. And so this brings us to our final timing question. Do you have any low basis stock? If you have some significant unrealized capital gains, then you may want to consider harvesting those gains at the 0% capital gains rate. To do this, in 2026, your taxable income needs to be below $49,450 for single filers and $98,900 for married filing jointly. If this is the case, then maybe you want to wait until after you've taken advantage of that 0% capital gains tax rate before you start making strategic Roth conversions. The taxable income from the Roth conversion could potentially bump you out of that 0% capital gains tax rate if that's something that you need. And once you've finally accounted for all of this when it comes to the timing of your conversions, the next question is, how do you do all of this? So to begin with, you need to map out your projected tax estimates for the current year. This is typically done in the fall with the aid of your CPA or financial planner using some sort of tax planning software. And once you've done that, there are a couple of ways to think about how much to convert. Converting up to the top of your tax bracket, or converting to your sustainable income level. So, for this first method, you'll need to estimate what your projected taxes will be for the current year and then calculate how much you can convert without crossing into the next tax bracket. And so this way, you're maximizing what you're able to convert at this current tax bracket, which ideally is lower than the one that you've spent during most of your working years. Now, there are a couple of criticisms of this method. One is that it could potentially drive you to convert too much. Let's say that you're married filing jointly and you're in the 22% tax bracket. You could potentially convert over $100,000 before you got to the top of your bracket. And you may not want to write that kind of a tax check in April. And so that's going to tee up our second method for determining how much to convert, converting up to the top of your sustainable retirement income. Let's say that you've run some retirement guardrails calculations and determined that your investments in Social Security can sustain $120,000 per year in retirement spending. But at the end of the year, you estimate that you're only going to actually spend around $105,000. Instead of converting to the top of your tax bracket, why not use that remaining $15,000 in your budget for a Roth conversion? You could take that $15,000 and convert it, withholding taxes on the conversion, and still stay within your sustainable withdrawal levels. And so this method takes some of the risk out of making it to that break-even age versus potentially taking those larger conversions every year. So we're starting to narrow down on an amount to convert, but there's still one more thing that we need to consider. IRMA penalties. So if you're age 63 or older, these partial Roth conversions come with one potential gotcha: IRMA penalties. These IRMA penalties are the Medicare surcharges that are added to your Part B and Part D premiums if your income crosses certain thresholds. And it's not just a one-year thing. The IRS does a 2-year look back on your modified adjusted gross income. So any conversions that you do at age 63 could potentially affect your Medicare premiums 2 years later. And so if you do a conversion that pushes you into the next IRMA bracket, you could potentially end up paying hundreds more in Medicare premiums than you initially expected. And so you may find that you need to back off on the amount that you convert in any given year because of these penalties. Now, there is one case where it may make more sense to go forward with bigger conversions, and that's when there's a big age difference between you and your spouse. We're talking something like 10 years difference here. Because your joint life expectancy ends up being much longer, it makes it that much easier to reach that break-even age on this conversion strategy. So, to put this all together, we start with if you should make these Roth conversions. Would your life expectancy assumptions mean that you wouldn't make the break-even ages on these conversions? Are you going to have lower taxable income in retirement? Do your legacy plans favor keeping your investments in tax-deferred accounts? And finally, are your RMDs going to be big enough to make this worth your time? If strategic Roth conversions could be right for you, then we move on to when you should convert. Do you have a plan to pay the taxes on the conversion? Will you have any income that year that could limit your conversions? And third, would it be more beneficial to harvest your capital gains at a 0% tax rate instead? And at that point, we move on to how to convert. Are you able to run a pro forma tax plan for your current tax year, or will you need to engage with someone to help you? Do you convert to the top of your current tax bracket, or do you convert to the top of your sustainable income instead? And finally, do you need to adjust your conversion amount to avoid IRMA penalties? And at this point, you should have a pretty good handle on the right amount to convert. And now that I've hopefully armed you with a logical framework on how to determine whether or not strategic Roth IRA conversions are right for you, you can have a little bit more confidence in doing this going forward. Because I want your retirement and your life to be an amazing one. If you need help building your dream retirement, click on the link below to book a call where we'll analyze your specific situation and show you if these conversions will make sense for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.